Take your mind back once again to being young at the tail end of the 1980s. If you're in the age group of people who can do this, I know that you'll have come across somebody with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures from Playmates. If you're around my age, you probably even had some of your own. These figures came at a perfect time, around the time of Transformers and Masters of the Universe, captivating the minds of young children. Thanks largely to the wildly popular TV show, the Turtles action figure line was a celebration of late 80s pop culture and almost MTV-influenced creativity, all held together under one of the most popular licensed toy lines of its time. To fully comprehend this, you had to be there. Then again, maybe you didn't. I mean, no matter how old you are, you've probably seen Ninja Turtles action figures at some point in your own life. I mean, we've had cartoons and movies in the late 80s, early 90s, 2003, 2007, 2012. Hell, even today, there's one on Nickelodeon currently running at the time of this recording. And there's probably even others that I'm forgetting about, or ignoring. Ninja Turtles action figures are all over the place, and a lot of collectors have been on board for decades and they know all about all this stuff already. Some people might have just jumped on recently and they're kind of wondering, well, where do I even start? This is a lot of stuff to take in. Believe me, I know, I was there for all of it, and even for me it's a lot. So with all these years of history and all these different versions of the Ninja Turtles out there today, it's time we asked ourselves, which are the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures? I'm pretty certain that the first versions of the Turtles that many people my age think of are the original Playmates versions. Now these are the ones we grew up with. I can't tell you how often I used to play with these. I mean, not technically these specific ones. These are actually from a reissue set from GameStop from 2019. This is a good set if you're looking strictly for nostalgia. Which, let's face it, when you're trying to get into collecting Ninja Turtles, nostalgia is going to play into your decision a lot. For these in particular, the nostalgia comes by way of being reproductions of the ones you remember from childhood. Now they aren't perfect reproductions though. The colors on these are slightly different than the original versions. If you're not too bothered by that, and you want a little more retro feel to your turtle figures, then this set's pretty good. The downside to these is that they only include their signature weapons, so if you'd rather have the complete weapons rack and the original colors, you're better off just buying the actual vintage figures, or any of the re-releases that have come out over the years prior to this set. Something to consider when picking your definitive turtle figures is the style of turtles that you prefer. The aesthetic of the characters has changed a lot since their inception, and that's going to be something you're going to want to look at. With the classic Playmates figures that we just discussed, those figures weren't really based on any one source. They actually represent a transition between the original designs of the Mirage comics and the late 80s cartoon that everyone's definitely seen at some point in their life. This explains those early Playmates figures having all the stylized details with the bulging muscles and the facial expressions reminiscent of the Mirage books, while also having the different colored bandanas, pads, and initial belt buckles that would become a staple of the first cartoon. Incidentally, there are options if you prefer a more specifically styled group of figures based on the 80s cartoon, or a version based on the Mirage comics. If you're all about the original team, the dark and gritty rendition of the Turtles, there's only one true choice. NECA is a name you're going to hear a lot in this video, and with good reason. At time of record, NECA has the license for Ninja Turtles, and they've been cranking out some excellent figures. But we'll get to all that. For right now, let's rewind back to 2008. NECA released the original Mirage versions of the Turtles, complete with their original comic stylings. They featured great paint applications, designed to reflect the line work of Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird's original art. They include their signature weapons, along with extra hands, various throwing blades, stars, ooze cans, and baby versions of the four turtles. Some versions even include diorama pieces that you can assemble. Nice touch. This is a great looking set, but unfortunately they can be a little costly on the secondary market. There are bootleg versions out there, but I can't really comment on the quality of the knockoffs. I don't have any of those myself. I do also know that Playmates has released versions of the classic comic Turtles, but if you want the better quality option, NECA is your best bet. Furthermore, if you're an absolute purist, NECA also released comic print style black and white versions of the Turtles that look as if they jumped straight out of the comics. I love these. But maybe you don't care about the original source material. Maybe your cup of tea is the 80s cartoon that basically launched the Turtles into the public eye. I mean, sure, the comics were popular among comic book fans who were into independent books, but the average person hadn't read it. Hell, I hadn't even read it until years later after the original cartoon had come and gone. I think it's pretty safe to say that the average person in the 80s and the 90s had definitely at least heard of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You know, they would have come across it somewhere. You couldn't go anywhere without Turtles on all sorts of advertisements for things or products. It was all over the place. It was madness. If you're one of the people that's really into the nostalgia, there's that word again, of the original 80s and early 90s Ninja Turtles cartoon, maybe you think that that's like the definitive version of the Ninja Turtles for you? Well, good news. You got a lot of options. Over the past few years, NECA, yes, that's the same NECA from earlier, has released a couple different versions of the heroes in a half shell. In 2019, they offered up exclusive sets to Target. Now each set featured a turtle and a villain. The idea was, if you bought all 4 sets, you'd end up with a complete collection of turtles and their adversaries. They would eventually offer sets that included just the turtles, 2 sets with 2 turtles apiece, to anybody who didn't want to get the bad guy characters. There are some noticeable differences in the figures between both sets. Most noticeably, the original set features darker olive green skin and brown shells, while the more recent versions have brighter green skin and dark green shells. The earlier versions also have some paint shading that the recent versions lack. To those of you wondering, the first versions were also available as a San Diego Comic-Con box set and are based on the cartoon artwork and color scheme, whereas the newer set is more in line with promotional material, reproduction merchandise, and any other retro-themed gifts and memorabilia you'd see on the market today. In other words, if you happen to come across 80s Ninja Turtles merchandise today, odds are they'll have this brighter color scheme. The figures themselves are great. They're easily able to get into great poses, which is perfect for photography, stop-motion animation, or just for displaying on your shelf. The amount of accessories is well worth the money in my opinion. Now bear in mind, each set runs about $50, so they're costly in that regard, but considering the inclusion of extra hands, cartoon-accurate props, and overall quality of the figures, I think these are great. The only question for you to answer is, which version of the Turtles do you prefer? The lighter green promotional colors, or the darker cartoon-accurate colors? Let me know in the comments. Speaking of the 80s Turtles, there was also a set of imports from SH Figuarts. Now these have varied in price over the years, anywhere between 45-ish to $60 a piece. I've had the chance to buy these over the years, but I never found myself all that interested. Something about them just seemed a little off to me. They're not bad figures by any means, though. I got the chance to mess with Leonardo at New York Comic Con one year. They do have a lot of unique things to them, but overall they just didn't really grab my interest. As a result, I can't really say too much about these figures, so I won't comment much more on them. If the cost of the import figures or the NECA figures seems a little too high dollar for your budget, you can still get a nice set of 80s Turtles for a reasonable price. There were also classic cartoon versions released by Playmates in 2012, I believe, which honestly weren't bad. The articulation's great, and the turtles themselves look pretty good. Not entirely accurate to the cartoon. As you can see, some creative liberties were taken, such as adding straps to Leonardo and Donatello's belts. Overall, this was a good set, although today, I think there are better alternatives. Still, these can be had for relatively cheap prices, as I don't believe their value ever really increased after they were released. Maybe with that in mind, I'll finally pick up Raphael. So I think by now, we've seen a lot of great options in this video, but we're really only getting started. See, in 1990, the first live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie came out. This blew my mind as a kid. This was like the older kid version of the Turtles, you know? Jim Henson Studios' involvement made the Turtles look probably more realistic than ever, and possibly even more realistic than anything that's come since as far as the Turtles go. And you already know that there are figures out there for this 1990 movie. Once again, leave it to NECA to provide excellent action figure representations of the original Ninja Turtles movie. The detail that NECA puts into their movie and TV figures is second to none, and that shows through with these figures. There are a few different ways to get these. Now the first would have been their San Diego Comic-Con box set from 2018, which was tough to come by and very costly on the secondary market. Then, there was the single-carded releases from early 2019 that you can find at GameStop and ThinkGeek. Those are the ones I got. But if you miss those, you can get the Walmart 2-packs that come out somewhere in the summer of 2020. Whatever route you take, I suggest you do what you can to get these if you have any interest. The attention to detail is spot on. All the variations in paint and sculpt are incredible. The likeness and expression on all 4 turtles' faces is spectacular. Something interesting worth noting, my Raphael is different from the one my roommate has. I'm not sure exactly what the deal is, but the face on his figure is angrier looking than mine, with more teeth showing and more menacing expression. Both are great, but just be aware that there are 2 versions. Playmates would also throw their hat in the ring for Movie Turtles back in 2014. These are very similar to the classic cartoon series they did in that they retain lots of articulation. However, unlike the cartoon versions, these lack in the detail to really make them contenders for best turtles in my opinion. There were different versions that came later, which improved on these by including more weapons and head sculpts. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the original Playmates movie star turtles from the early 90s. Those are great for novelty and nostalgia's sake, but if you're looking for movie turtles, there's absolutely no comparison. NECA is the clear winner here. So between the original comics, the first cartoon, and the 1990 movie, you got a lot of great options for Ninja Turtle action figures. And as time went on, the first 3 movies came and went, and the Ninja Turtle franchise kind of lied dormant for nearly a decade. The franchise pretty much did nothing, honestly. It was weird to see such a large franchise do nothing for the later half of the 90s, but that's exactly what happened. This is not revisionist history. Do not do any research to verify my claims. Eventually, there would be a rebirth of sorts. I'm, of course, talking about the 2003 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. This wasn't one I watched at the time. I did go back and watch a bunch of it after the fact, so I am kind of familiar with it. Basically, they reinterpreted a bunch of the original Mirage comic stories and animated them for a TV series, which I think worked really well, and a lot of fans really do like this show even today. And of course, every time you got a new cartoon, you know what comes with it. That's right, brand new figures. The figure line for the 2003 show ran for years, along with the cartoon. Sadly though, this version of the team isn't really getting much love from modern toy companies. The first figures of this era by Playmates are fun, and design-wise they're really cool. But they are meant for kids, so as a result they lack any of the added articulation or accessories or aesthetic that adult collectors would be interested in. Still, I'm happy to have a set of these. As showpieces, they are a pretty nice looking group. A few years down the road, we'd see the first Turtle movie since the 90s trilogy. This time, it was all CG, and the Turtles were redesigned to have a new, slimmer, more animated look. The tie-in toy line came with it. This line didn't go too deep since they really only had one movie to go off of rather than a full multi-episode series. That said, the 4 Turtles do look a lot like their movie counterparts. Granted, these figures do suffer from the same issues I mentioned with the 2003 figures, meaning they're meant for kids and might lack the things that adult collectors want in their figures. If you're a major Ninja Turtle fan, this is the only way that I'm aware of to get figures based on the 2007 movie. But realistically, unless you're a huge fan of the designs or a completist, you could probably skip these altogether. That said, I do like them. So after this 2007 movie came out, a lot of people were kind of wondering what was going to happen next. A sequel seemed pretty likely, but it just never really happened. I mean, could they use these designs for a new TV show? Yeah, I mean, they could. I think it would have worked, but that didn't really happen either. Now it'll be a couple years later, 2012, when Nickelodeon would get the rights to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and we get a whole brand new series. Also CG, like the previous movie we just talked about, totally redesigned, totally reimagined, and featured a lot of new things for a brand new audience. Now just like with all prior iterations of the Turtles, we got a figure line that came right along with this cartoon series. I bought the original 4 Turtles, and a few of the other figures back in the day. I gotta say, the sculpt work and detail is nice. The accessories and the articulation have improved from the figures from the previous cartoon from a decade prior. These toys are legitimately fun, and they're well made. I can't be mad at these. But unlike the previous few versions that we talked about, the 2012 Turtles did eventually get a set of figures catered to the serious adult collector. This time, it would be Revoltech, a company that's known for making figures that are highly stylized and superposable. That style of figure is hit and miss with a lot of collectors due to the aesthetic of the figure itself being sacrificed at times in order to create better options for articulation and more extreme posing. Personally, I think these are great. The stylized look of the 2012 cartoon translates exceptionally well to this style of figure. The attention to detail is excellent, with every turtle being a completely unique sculpt. Each of the 4 figures is also able to hit a huge range of poses. Additionally, each figure comes with its own base to display it with, along with various accessories, weapons, and additional heads for more display options. And I did already mention the articulation and posing options. This is where these figures blow all the other Ninja Turtles figures out of the water. They move around like no others. You want them to leap into a battle? Got it. How about go for a joyride? No problem. Want them to shift their gaze? Sure thing. You could literally move their eyes by adjusting their bandanas, making their pupils face whatever direction you want, or put them into attack mode and move their pupils aside altogether, giving their eyes that classic whited out comic book look. Being that these are meant for adult collectors, the price point is significantly higher than the domestic Playmates figures. Each figure cost me about $65, which makes this the most expensive set in this video, not counting aftermarket prices. Are they worth it? Well, to me, yes, they are. The amount of fun you can have posing these guys around and just enjoying all their unique features, coupled with their accuracy to the TV show designs, makes these absolute standout figures in anyone's collection. I think that about wraps up everything I wanted to say. Obviously, there are more versions of the Turtles out there that I just don't have any experience with, so I can't really talk about them. For example, the 12-inch tall figures from Mondo, which do look amazing. the 18-inch 1990 movie figures from NECA, which are basically the same as the smaller 7-inch figures I showed, but just in a much larger scale. And there have been some kids' toy lines for the Michael Bay movies, which I don't have a lot of positive things to say about. At time of record, Nickelodeon is a few years deep into their series called Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which features yet another redesign of the characters, along with a brand new toy line. I'm not familiar with the show or the toys. Something about these character designs just doesn't really appeal to me. I can't really put my finger on it, but I just know I'm not the guy to give you any information on these toys. I don't own any of my own, so I can't really talk about them. At time of record, there's also a line of Turtles from Super 7 coming. These look like super reimagined versions of the original Playmates figures, right down to the sculpts and accessories. I'm on board for the 4 Turtles, that's pretty much a given. And when I do get those, I'll be sure to make a video with them. So with that all said, we looked at a lot of really awesome action figures here today. Lots of great versions of the Ninja Turtles. It's time we ask ourselves, which version is your favorite? Now I know I said best in the title of the video, and it's really hard to pick a best. A lot of that comes down to, nostalgia. Which version of the Turtles aesthetically do you like the best? Like visual-wise and everything, their designs, all of it. For me personally, it's a lot harder of a choice to make than you might think. See, there's so many good versions, as we discussed, it's tough to narrow it down. But for me, I think I'm going to toss it up between the Revoltech 2012 versions and the NECA comic book original Mirage versions. Black and white or color, doesn't really matter. They're both awesome. They're really aesthetically pleasing figures. I mean, the design work on both of them is great, and the amount of fun you can have just messing with them, that's it. That's the ones for me. What about you? Which ones do you like best? You got a favorite set? There's a comment box down there. You can tell me all about it. Go ahead. Get in there. Thank you so much for watching this. I do plan on doing some more kind of stuff like this in the future at some point. I don't know exactly when. But if you like this kind of stuff, give me a thumbs up. Or leave a comment, or share the video, do whatever you want. I'm also going to have some stop motion links on the screen somewhere. I don't know exactly where. There it is. If you're into stop motion, or if you're an action figure enthusiast, you might like the stuff I do. If not, just click it anyway. Nobody's going to be mad at you for getting my view count up. Thank you very much for watching this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Later on.